This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. There's a certain stereotype of politicians, especially Southern politicians, as slick charmers, folks who run first and foremost on charisma and kissing babies. That stereotype didn't come out of the blue. For a long time, a lot of the people who ran Nashville fit the bill, at least on first glance. But for the last couple of decades, Nashville has tended instead to prefer mayors who come off more brainy. Being a policy nerd seems to pay off better than being good at glad-handing. And I feel like that traces back, at least in part, to something that happened on this day in 1990. Today, it's October 15th, 2024. But go back in a time machine exactly 34 years, and you'll emerge into a world where there's no Batman building on the downtown skyline. The Parthenon has only just gotten its statue of Athena, and daytime TV talk shows regularly make headlines. Look a little closer at the goings-on in Nashville, and you'll also find that folks are talking a lot about the mayor's personal life. Bill Boner was married at the time. He was also engaged to another woman. The fuss was enough that Boner had already announced in May that he would not seek re-election the following year. And perhaps, if that's all that happened, Bill Boner's infidelity would have registered as a relatively small blip, a political career that just sort of bumped up against local norms and fizzled out. But on this day, Boner and his fiancée, Tracy Peel, went on national television to defend themselves. They were guests on the Phil Donahue Show. The entire hour was about their story. There was substantial discussion about the needs of the city and about whether or not politicians should be judged by their personal lives. But that's not what got attention. About 35 minutes into the show, Boner and Peel stepped over to a pair of mic stands and gave a musical performance. She sang Rocky Top while he played harmonica. They did a pretty good job. She was a professional singer, after all, and the harmonica had long been a feature of Boner's campaign events. 3 years prior, at the after-party for his inauguration, Boner held his own playing harmonica with Brenda Lee. But the studio audience was not into it. They followed Peel's prompting to clap in time, but the camera kept cutting to shots of people looking profoundly uncomfortable. No smiles, just stone-faced disapproval or nervous expressions that seemed to say, "Is this really happening now?" And that was the overwhelming response in Middle Tennessee, too. The general consensus in Nashville and in the surrounding communities was that Boner didn't just look foolish as an individual. He made us all a laughingstock. It looked like we were living up to the mean jokes about backwoods Southerners if that was how our mayor acted on a national stage. The Nashville scene went so far as to start a new annual tradition of soliciting reader jokes about stupid or embarrassing things and named them for Bill Boner. To become mayor, Boner had beaten out a man named Phil Bredesen. Some Nashvillians were slow to warm to Bredesen because he wasn't from here, or even anywhere in the South. He was a guy from New Jersey who went to Harvard. And a feeling many expressed in the 1987 election was that, sure, he was smart, but could he really get Nashville enough to be mayor? I mean, keep in mind, this was in a time before being a Nashville native made you an oddity in some neighborhoods. The rapid growth spurt of people moving here from other parts of the U.S. had not yet begun. Bill Boner, on the other hand, had won votes by being one of us, and he absolutely bolstered that perception by presenting throughout the campaign as an old-school Southern politician, leading with his giant grin and, yeah, a harmonica. How much more down-home could he be? After the collective embarrassment of the Phil Donahue Show, Phil Bredesen won the 1991 election handily, and his model set a new general standard for folks who win the mayor's race in this city. And perhaps that moment of feeling like, oh no, we do look like bumbling hicks, spurred on a larger change. Under the Bredesen administration, we started to become more of a city that truly seeks to gain the respect of the nation as a whole. One that wants to be taken seriously more than just sort of left alone to do its traditional and customary thing. And of course, tons of credit should be given to Mayor Bredesen for pushing the city to take big steps like building Bridgestone Arena and courting the Tennessee Titans. But I can't help but think that part of our modern self-identity as Nashvillians was born on this day in 1990 when we looked at ourselves through an outsider's lens and realized that wasn't necessarily what we wanted anymore. Bus rapid transit is at the heart of Nashville's transit referendum. In a few minutes, we'll dig into what that really is. That's coming up after the newscast.
Here's the mantra I think about at WPLN. We connect the dots. It captures a mindset that our journalism is not merely about the latest press release or proclamations by officials. Instead, we can develop expertise, dig deeper, and look to history to understand what's happening now. I'm Tony Gonzalez, news director. When I'm planning coverage and editing stories, the best part is being part of a team that's curious about our community and invested in its future.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Residents of a North Nashville community are condemning Saturday's shooting at a street fair on Jefferson Street. One man was killed and 9 others were injured, including 2 children. Police now say the incident began as an exchange of gunfire between members of rival gangs, but the majority of people injured were caught in the crossfire. Metro Nashville police have arrested 2 people in relation to the firefight. Both are 24-year-olds who lived near the site of the shooting. They're suspected of being shooters, and they are charged with criminal homicide. Jefferson Street Missionary Baptist Church responded to the violence by taking part of its Sunday service outside to pray for the victims. One churchgoer, Nicole Harris-Tolliver, told News Channel 5, quote, "It just is not an accurate reflection of the people who live in this area, the love this area has for the whole city of Nashville." Democratic State Representative Gloria Johnson is challenging Republican U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn for one of Tennessee's 2 U.S. Senate seats. WPLN's Paige Flager reports the ads the candidates have released so far reflect their priorities, with Johnson making her case on Tennessee issues and Blackburn campaigning on her national record.
A lot of Johnson's ads start like this.
For 30 years, I was a teacher, not a politician.
She frames herself as a champion of the everyday Tennessean, talking about issues like healthcare costs, reproductive rights, and education.
What I do is fight for justice for real people, because that's what Tennessee deserves.
The spots feel local, with one tying back to the Covenant School shooting and her role as a member of the so-called Tennessee Three.
And when my friends and I believed mothers and fathers who'd lost children at Covenant deserved a voice, and we fought for it, they expelled them.
By contrast, Blackburn's ads mainly focus on issues with a national scope, touting her record since taking office in 2019 as the first woman to represent Tennessee in the U.S. Senate. One is about how tough she is on China.
Chinese communists are buying up land all over America.
Our farmland.
Land near military bases. It's happening right here in Tennessee.
And Marsha Blackburn won't stand for it.
It's worth noting Chinese-owned land is a tiny fraction of all foreign-owned land in the U.S., and an NPR investigation didn't find any in Tennessee. Another ad, narrated by a former pro wrestler, praises her stance on border security.
Marsha steps into the ring for Tennessee every day, blasting China, fighting inflation, and defending our border like a heavyweight champ.
Even though control of the U.S. Senate is up for grabs this November, this race probably won't decide that balance of power. No Democrat has won a statewide race in Tennessee since 2006.
I'm Gloria Johnson.
I'm Marsha Blackburn.
And I'm Paige Flager for WPLN News.
Paul Collins loves making life-sized books, literally. Some of the books the Nashville-based artist has created are up to 6.5 feet tall. After state lawmakers passed legislation censoring what books can and cannot be found in our public schools and libraries, Collins was inspired to create the Unbannable Library. He assembled giant blank books and then asked pairs of artists and writers to transform each in honor of a banned text. Collins tells This Is Nashville that the public response has been positive.
People see these, and it's a little bit of giggle and it's a little bit of awe because the scale is really big and the visuals are really, really powerful. And so I would hope somebody would say, these books, like how can they put so much joy in this space when it's supposed to be a fraught, scared space.
Some of the books are currently displayed at 4 Nashville public libraries. The entire collection will appear at the Southern Festival of Books later this month. You can hear the full conversation with Collins on yesterday's This Is Nashville episode, which is available as a podcast feed or on our website. The vast majority of Nashville's theater companies don't own their own spaces to rehearse or perform. That means sharing just a few performance venues in the city. Finding affordable and adequate rehearsal space is another challenge. Kenny Dozier is the founder and director of Kenny Playhouse Theater, which stages shows about the Black experience in the U.S. He says he really can't be picky.
I've been in cold places. I've been in dirty places. I've been in small places. I feel like sometimes I've been in closets. We've rehearsed outside before. We rehearsed around the Titan Stadium outside.
Many theater companies say Nashville's skyrocketing real estate prices make it impossible for them to buy a space of their own. Dozier thinks the city government should help by building more theater venues in some of its unused buildings. And you can learn more about how theater companies deal with a lack of space at WPLN.org. Starting today, you'll need a permit from the state government if you want to burn yard waste or any natural debris in Tennessee. The state's Division of Forestry says burning the extra debris caused by Hurricane Helene could increase the risk of wildfires. To get a permit, you can go to burnsafetn.org or on the MyTN mobile app. Burning without a permit until at least May 15th will be a misdemeanor. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. A key concept within Nashville's transit proposal is known as Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT. It's a bus service that functions unlike what Nashville has now, with traffic lanes only for buses and signals that go green to keep them moving. It's all meant to create more frequent and reliable service. As Nashvillians consider this proposal on Election Day, WPLN Cynthia Abrams examines what's proposed and how BRT is working in other cities.
Before Mayor Freddie O'Connell unveiled the details of his transit plan, a big question loomed. Would he pursue light rail? The answer was ultimately no. Light rail lost big back in 2018. So O'Connell went with a different kind of high-capacity transit, BRT. While it can't carry quite as many people as trains, WeGo's director Steve Bland says it has its perks. It's much cheaper to build, and it's easier to integrate into existing bus routes.
In its highest form, it's kind of like a light rail vehicle, but with rubber tires.
He specifies highest form because BRT can look like a lot of different things. Some include dedicated lanes, others don't. Some have traffic signal priority, some don't. As far as Nashville goes, the referendum considers at least 4 major roads, Dickerson, Gallatin, Murfreesboro, and Nolensville Pikes, for dedicated lanes. 6 more streets would receive BRT-style reliability.
If we say it's going to take 15 minutes to get from point A to point B, it doesn't take 12 minutes today, 17 minutes tomorrow, 25 minutes the day after. It takes 15 minutes.
But this isn't the first time Nashville has tried to introduce BRT. More than a decade ago, leaders proposed a dedicated lane down West End, known as the AMP. The proposal was thwarted amid major opposition. And when the plan died, the federal funding that Nashville had received was redirected to a different city.
So you can ride the AMP, but you have to go to Indianapolis to do it.
Nashville's miss was Indianapolis's gain. Through this funding, plus a referendum approving an income tax increase, Indianapolis built 13 miles of BRT. It's known as the Red Line. The city will soon launch a new Purple Line, and a third is in the works. Before those projects, many of those streets were a mess.
We're talking, pitted roads and giant potholes that could swallow a car, terrible drainage so that after a rainy day, you had lots of ponding and pooling, lack of sidewalks, lack of ADA curb ramps.
That's Carrie Black, a spokesperson for Indigo.
And now, if you drive down this same corridor, it's night and day. It is transformational.
And it's not just roads. Black points to boosted economic development along the lines.
Businesses, those who are providing jobs, affordable housing developers, all recognize the importance of setting up alongside a bus rapid transit line.
Of course, Indianapolis is a larger city than Nashville. But cities that are just a fraction of Nashville's size have BRT and have been sharing similar takeaways with leaders here. Take Richmond, Virginia, and its 7-mile BRT system.
And it's been so successful that we are now in 2023, 2024, having much broader acceptance of transit overall, not just the BRT, but overall acceptance of transit.
That's Julie Tim, who oversaw Richmond's system. Along with Indianapolis, these leaders have the same advice for Nashville.
Whatever you do, make sure you are clear in your communication. Even the bad stuff that you don't want to say, keep it real.
She says challenges are inevitable. Building BRT, while cheaper than light rail, still costs millions per mile. And building dedicated lanes would be very disruptive. So it will be up to Nashville's voters. Is the disruption worth the transformation? Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Nashville's transit referendum will ask voters to approve a half-cent sales tax increase to fund a major transit overhaul. In addition to the proposed bus rapid transit, this would include things like new sidewalks, updated signals, a dozen new transit centers, and more. Officials say regardless of whether the referendum is approved, they are looking to bring BRT to Murfreesboro Pike. If the referendum is approved, Murfreesboro could serve as a model for how bus rapid transit could operate on different corridors across the city. Prior to any implementation, there would be major community engagement efforts. To read more of WPLN's coverage of the upcoming referendum, visit WPLN.org/transit. Thanks for listening to the Nash Villager podcast. We take this look at Nashville news every weekday. If you like it, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite podcasting app and tell a friend or give us a mention on your socials. It really helps get the word out. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can become a member at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.